Our next session is What's Going On with Laura Caster from Woodcraft Folk.
We will be looking at pictures from around the world of actions that take place every day and discussing what impacts these actions have on our environment.
The pictures will include activities such as flying, fracking, driving, meat farming and more.
We will also be looking at how we can change these pictures for more sustainable actions that wouldn't have such a disastrous impact on our world and future.
Woodcraft Folk are passionate about empowering young people to create a future that is bright, equal and sustainable, and is an educational movement for children and young people.
There we go, my camera should be on now. Hopefully everybody can see my smiling face. And I'm here. So this session is brought to you by the Woodcraft Folk. My name's Lauren and I'm going to be presenting the session today. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the Slido chats, and I'm welcoming you all here. And I'm really glad that you've been able to make it along to our session. I would really love it if people could interact in our chat as well, so that I can hear as many ideas as people have to share. This session was originally a very interactive session and a chance for people to discuss the pictures that we're going to look at, but this is slightly different. So I've got some notes of the things that I would say about each picture, and people can make their own thoughts and hopefully share with us in the chat as well. So we are Woodcraft Folk, as I said, and for those of you who don't know, Woodcraft Folk is a national youth organisation, and we've been running since 1925, which is a long time ago now. And we are an educational movement for children and young people, which hopefully lots of the people watching at the moment are children and young people as well as adults. So every week around the UK, we have groups who meet weekly and play fun games, do crafts, play some drama, have debates and lots of outdoor activities, as well as regular camping trips and days out throughout the year as well. So they meet locally. We also do lots of things nationally and regionally as well. Woodcraft Folk are really passionate about empowering young people to have our voices heard, so that young people sometimes often their voices are not listened to, or people kind of put them down to say that what they don't know what maybe adults know, but we're all about empowering young people and listening to young people's ideas, and also exploring big ideas such as working together. We're very big on cooperation. We like to work together in our groups, but also working together as one world. So people from different countries working together, different continents working together, looking out for our nature and the environment around us, looking at peace and how we can make our future more peaceful, more fair, more equal, and also educating for social change. So looking at big ideas such as the climate emergency, other big ideas such as people littering, such as inequality in the world, and lots of other things as well. So what are we going to look at today in our session as part of the Youth Climate Summit, which I'm sure you've all been having great fun with the other sessions that are going on as well. We're going to look at what keeps our planet alive and healthy. We're going to think about what actions people are taking part in that affect our planet negatively, and whether there are alternatives to these negative actions that are going on, and what actions people and we ourselves can take to make positive changes in our world. So those are the things we're going to look at. If anybody has any questions as we go along, please feel free to put them in the Slido chat, as I said, and I will get to them as soon as I can. I think there might be a bit of a delay between you writing your comment and it coming to me, but we will go back to it if anybody has anything to say. I'm really interested to hear what people are thinking. So next slide. So the first big question is, what does our world need? We've got a picture here of a world looking happy and it's smiling at us, and we've got a picture of a world looking not so happy, and it's got a bit of a sad face on. So what does our world need? If you've got any ideas that I don't mention, please feel free, as I say, to put them into the chat. And we will share those as we go. So just like us, we are all humans and we all need certain things to stay alive and to make us happy. We need water, we need food, we need shelter, we need lots of different things. But really the earth, there's two big things that will make it very happy and have this big smile on, which we can see in the picture here. And two of those things are having clean water, which we also need as humans, and also having clean air, which again, we need as humans. So really, when our earth is happy and our earth has got that big smile on, then lots of humans will have that big smile on as well. Not everybody necessarily, but with those basics, most people can also be smiling. But humans, you know, we live in this world and we dominate this world. And we want to travel. Everybody likes to, when they can, go on a holiday or go to different parts of our country, or maybe even travel internationally as well. So we need to think about that. I've kind of put a seed in everybody's mind now. What kinds of ways do we travel as humans? We also, as humans, like to create technologies and make new things and bigger computers and new phones and new laptops and iPads and all sorts of things, which do make our lives faster, and some would argue make our lives better as well, because we can more easily communicate with people, we can more easily get places, we can have all of the toys and all of the different food and everything that we desire with technology and with these new moving forward in our world. But this has had a massive impact on our world. And sometimes some of these traveling and technologies and making our lives faster and better, as the pictures show, can sometimes make our world a little bit sad. So we've got to think as well that humans take up quite a lot of the earth. There are a lot of humans living on the earth, but there are also over 8.7 million different species of animal out there. And there's 400,000 species of plants who also call our earth home. So they're also living in our planet, and they also need clean water and clean air and land to live on and shelter and places where they can find food as well. So we're going to have a look at how our human actions are having an impact on the homes of animals and plants as well. So hopefully that all makes sense. And as I say, if there are any comments, just send them through to me. Perfect. So what we're going to do, here's the activity of the whole session, is we're going to look at some pictures and we're going to try and answer these 5 questions. Now, some of the pictures might have more questions, some of the pictures might have less questions. Some of the pictures might have slightly different questions, but these are our 5 most important questions that we're going to try and answer through each picture. So everybody get their thinking minds on, ready to think about these questions. So the questions are, what is going on in this picture? So we'll look at different pictures and you need to think about what's going on. Is this scene helpful to our environment? Now that question might be a bit confusing, but I'm interested to hear what people think that might mean by, is it helpful to our environment? Is this scene helpful to humans? So again, there might be some actions that are very helpful to humans to help us live that fast and better life, as we just mentioned. So they might be helpful to humans, but they might not be so helpful to our environment. Is this scene helpful to animals? Same question again. Might be helpful to animals, but it might not be so helpful to the environment. Is this scene helpful to plants and trees? So same again, looking at all different living things, are we being helpful? Next question, what can we do? So this first question is about kind of small world. What can we do as individuals? What can we do in our households? What can we do with our friends at school? Or, you know, at other settings, at youth groups, at Woodcraft Folk, if we go to Scouts or any other groups. And what can we do as a whole school or as a whole organisation to change this image? Then we need to think about the bigger picture. What can leaders of our countries, what can governments, and what can the world together do to change this image? So we've got the smaller picture, individuals, then we've got the bigger picture, which is what can leaders and governments and the world together do to change this image. So I'm going to get the first image up now, and I'm going to give 10 seconds just for everybody to have a look at the image and to have a think, and to think again about our questions. What is going on in this picture? How is it affecting our environment? Is it helpful to our environment? Is it helpful to humans? Is it helpful to animals? Is it helpful to plants and trees? What can we do to change this image? What can we do, big picture, to change this image? So I'm going to see if any comments come in from anybody who might be watching, and then I'm going to have a think. I'm going to tell you what I think about this image. So, what is going on in this image? I will give you my answer, is that this image is showing some very dry land, which is cracked from lots of heat and not so much rain. So possibly a drought, but we can't be 100% sure, but this is what we're assuming from looking at the picture. So this drought or this cracking of the land might have happened from there not being so much rain, as I say, but also from a change in temperature. So our world, as you might have heard lots of times, rising temperatures from different emissions being put out there and making our world. So somebody's put that it looks like drought and this would be bad for animals and their habitats. Exactly right. Well done to whoever said that. That's exactly what I've got written down here. Somebody else has said no plants for animals to eat, which again, really, really important, because we all like to eat. We mentioned that in the introduction. But what if there's nothing for the animals to eat? Eventually, those animals are either going to have to leave where they naturally were made and where they naturally should live, and they're going to have to go and live somewhere else. But there might be other animals there. So that becomes very, very complicated for us. So it's not so helpful, because as we can see, there's lots of cracks in the ground. And although we can see a couple of little bits of grass, they're not really going to grow into those big trees that we can see at the back of our image. So that's really good answers, that there's not so much. So somebody else has put in the chat, it would be difficult for humans to grow food. Exactly that. This land, when it's dry like this and there's cracks in the land, there's not really anything that anybody can do. No human could live there because there's no water. There's no place to grow food, as somebody's rightfully said. There's also nowhere for animals to live there because there's no food for them to eat either. Miss Hewitt said not enough animals, not enough food and water. Exactly that. I'm so glad that we had lots of really good comments there, because that's exactly what I hoped for in this session. So let's have a think now to our other questions. Let's just go back to our questions, remembering our picture, is that what can we do to change this image? So we could think about the fact that our Earth, as we say, is heating up, and maybe there's a change in temperature. So we might come a bit later on to things that we can do to change that. So thanks, everybody. Let's see if we can look at the next one. Oh, somebody else has said in the chat, sorry, it might be natural for that part of the world, but if not, we think humans might have made an impact. They could have destroyed trees, and roots no longer keep the soil stable and healthy. That's exactly right. So lots of places around the world are naturally very dry. This picture in particular is showing a difference from, if you can see in the back of the picture, there's definitely some greenery and some trees, but this part of the land has definitely been affected by humans. And we can see that there's some human intervention in the picture, because we can see a fence running along. So there's obviously been a human there to build the fence. And I can even see a water pump in the back of the picture. So they must get some water there, but it's not natural. So Miss Hewitt is saying as well that they could grow more plants here so that different animals could either come back to where they used to live, which is here, or they could maybe encourage new animals to come. I think that's a really, really good idea. So the next picture, we're going to look at some of the same questions and maybe a slight an addition to this one as well. So we're going to think again, really good. What is going on in this picture? Is this scene helpful to our environment? Is this scene helpful to humans, animals, plants and trees? is there an alternative to this? It's a new question. Is there a different way that we could do this? Or maybe there's a solution, something that would fix this. And what can we in our small world do to change this? And what can leaders and governments in the bigger picture do to change this image? So here is our next image. Again, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. We've got 3 different images actually on this page. So we can have a look at all of them. And first of all, think about what is going on and who is it affecting, and where did these, there are some things in this image especially that maybe shouldn't be there. So where did these things come from? So this one, I think lots of people know, and we talk about this a lot at school and in our Woodcraft Folk groups especially, is something called plastic pollution. So I'm sure everybody's heard of plastic pollution. I'm sure everybody's heard of plastic. Some people maybe even in their packed lunch today had some plastic. Maybe this morning somebody might have used when they were getting ready something else that's in this picture here. So please let me know in the chat what we are thinking. So for me, this picture is showing plastic pollution, as I just said, but it's showing animals that are stuck and animals that can't get out of the situation that they are in. So for example, in this bottom picture, we can see that a seahorse is holding on to a cotton bud that normally people use to take their makeup off or to clean their ears or to, you know, help to clear something else up. And somebody's put in the chat that animals are getting caught in plastic. That's exactly what is happening here. And sadly, we see these images quite a lot. So somebody has said cut plastic before putting in the bin. Perfect. We'll come to that when we come to our maybe our solutions or what we could do. So could you perhaps offer some recommendations? Yes, we will come to that one in just a minute, whoever put about recommendations for the last picture. But for this one, this is not very helpful and really sad that we have inflicted the pain and the suffering on these animals, especially as these animals could never and would never inflict this kind of pain on us. We don't often see the bird or the hedgehog drink cans of their plastic being left behind. So this is really unhelpful to animals, as we can see. And what could we do about this? Oh, sorry, but it's also missed out a little point. Is that actually these ring cans, so most of the pictures here have got pictures of sort of drink can holders, which these plastic things just hold cans of drink together. So they might be useful for somebody who's maybe taking some drinks to a picnic or maybe just buying some and needs to get them home, but they're only useful to humans once. And as somebody's really helpfully put in the chat, people could stop using single-use plastic, exactly that. So you could either take these plastic rings once you've used them and take them back to the shop that you bought them from and say, I'm done with this now, you can dispose of it. And that would encourage other companies and shops and corporations to maybe stop also using single-use plastic because it doesn't biodegrade, so we can't, if we just leave it on the beach or in the park, it's just going to sit there in its exact form for hundreds and hundreds of years and not break down. So we could look at using a biodegradable plastic to hold things together, a biodegradable material, sorry, to hold things together. Or we could look at different ways, maybe putting them in a cardboard box or something different. So somebody else in the chat has put lots of plastic, which is affecting the animal's natural habitat. Humans should start to use reusable materials instead of plastic. That's exactly right. And that is what I love to hear, is that people already know about these things and we're just putting it in the forefront of everybody's brain to be thinking about it again. Somebody else has said that we could ask shops to use better packaging. That is exactly right. And as I'm saying, everybody could take their plastic packaging back to the shop that they bought it from and say to them, this is actually your problem and not my problem, because you need to think of a better way to package things. So somebody said that they could cut the plastic before putting it in the bin, which I think is exactly what people are being advised to do, because as we can see with our poor hedgehog here, if somebody had just cut all of those rings so that they weren't full circles, then actually that poor hedgehog's head wouldn't have got stuck in it. It would still be littering our earth, and it still probably wouldn't have been left in the right place for this hedgehog to find it, but at least they wouldn't have got stuck and it wouldn't have affected them and their lives as much as it has in this picture. So we can, in our small world, avoid buying things with single-use plastic. We can avoid buying them. We can use our own reusable packaging maybe, but we can also, as I say, take them back to the shops. We can write to the big companies who are making these different plastic packagings, and we can ask them to use better packaging, as somebody's rightfully put in the chat. So well done to everybody for that one. So the next one, we've only got 4 questions on this one. So we're thinking about what is going on in this picture, as we are in all of them. Is this scene helpful to our environment? Is it helpful to humans, animals, plants and trees? And a new question, what does this mean for the future? So again, we're going to have another couple of seconds to look at the picture. Look at the picture, excuse me, and then I would like to know what people think about this. What is going on in this picture? Has somebody just put a house inside a lake? Has somebody just put a house inside a dirty swimming pool? What is going on in this picture? So, from my point of view, this picture, and from where I got this picture from, so I know, this picture is representing flooding that can happen to homes where people live. It can also happen to shops, it can also happen to schools and other places as well. So somebody's just made a comment about our last image, so that gives everybody another couple of seconds to think about this one, saying that customers should refuse to buy items that are packaged in this way. Money talks, and if customers take a stand, the big companies will take notice. Thank you, Lucas, for saying that, because that's exactly what I'm saying. If we don't buy them, or if we take them back their packaging and say, you need to deal with this, then it's going to put people off using that packaging, excuse me, in the future, which I think is a very important thing to take forward. So somebody is saying that this picture, our new picture, is showing people's homes flooding, which is exactly right. So this could be due to a lot of rainfall, could be due to a lot of rainfall happening and this house being close to a river. And obviously when the rain falls, the rivers rise, and that could end up the river cascading out into our towns. And anybody who was watching the news earlier this year will have seen that in the UK, we're getting a lot more of this flooding at the moment due to a lot more rainfall, a lot more rivers bursting their banks or estuaries bursting their banks, and it's extreme quantities of rain and the ground just not being able to absorb that much rain. So somebody else has said this will mean people will lose their homes and have nowhere to live. Exactly that. So that's how it's affecting humans. Our houses, so this person's house, for example, their whole downstairs is underwater. And we can see that if there was more rain on top of this, then the water could rise even more and go into some of those windows, which we can see there as well. So I would say that nobody can live in this house, or they could only live upstairs and they'd have to swim to school, and it wouldn't be so great. So exactly that, people will lose their homes, they don't have anywhere to live. What will happen to the animals, even the pets of the people who live in that house, or animals that maybe are insects that live in the trees that we can see behind, or in the greenery behind? What would happen if it was a river and there were fish living in that river and the river burst its banks? Where would the fish go? The fish might end up on the high street, for example, swimming down the high street in the water, and eventually when the water either absorbs into the ground, goes down a drain, goes back into the river, sometimes we lose animals and we don't get them back. So somebody's put exactly right in the chat that animals will lose their homes too. Just like humans, when we have this excess amount of rain, they can end up losing their shelter and losing their food supply sometimes as well, because this much rain, although we say that when we're growing food, rain is very, very important, and I completely think that it is, but this much rain is going to actually drown any crops. So if these people, for example, they might have had some tomatoes growing in their front garden or some courgettes growing, those plants will also have drowned in this flood. So it's not just humans and our possessions that get ruined in a flood, but also any crops, any animals who could lose their homes as well. And sometimes it might not just be a house that gets flooded, but a cafe or a school or a shop. And this could also mean that people lose their jobs, lose their income, and also their homes, as we said. So as I mentioned, we saw quite a lot of this at the beginning of 2020 in the UK, and we're seeing a lot more of it as time goes on and as our climate and our weather gets affected. And what does this mean for people who are maybe building houses or changing houses? Means that people won't want to live near rivers or near to the beach, because they would think, if I live there, my house is definitely going to get flooded. Somebody else put in the chat, imagine how worse the problem would be if the ice caps melt. We also need to start taking care of our rivers, which drain the land. Well done, Phoebe, that is exactly right. And if the ice caps melt, all that ice, all that melted ice, which is water, as we know, has to go somewhere, goes into the seas. So the seas rise a bit like if you put more water into a bath, and eventually land is going to get flooded. That is very important, Phoebe, well done. We're going to look at the next picture now, which is, again, same 5 questions. What's going on? Is it helpful to our environment? Is it helpful to humans, animals, plants and trees? What can we do, and what can leaders and governments do? So this one is exactly what Phoebe from Seaford has just mentioned. We can see in this picture a polar bear. We can see that this polar bear is lying down on the ice. So the ice hasn't completely melted. They're not in the water, but we can see that the ice is thinning. So I'm going to take Phoebe's comment about how the ice caps are melting. So the habitat of this polar bear is very much reducing. You can see where maybe the ice has melted, and maybe, you know, a few years ago, this whole area that we're looking at in this picture would be covered in white, and we might not even be able to make out the polar bear because they might be camouflaged in there. But we can see how much it's reducing. And every year we lose, or because they melt, 10 Olympic-sized swimming pools every year. And that ice, it doesn't refreeze. So once it's melted and it's gone back into the sea, it has been lost. So that's a really scary and sad view. And it means, for us, it means, like we just mentioned, that our seas might rise and that our houses are more likely to flood and lots of different things. But for the animals, which is what we're thinking about as well in this session, poor animals are going to have less areas where they can go and hunt for the food that they usually would eat, and less areas where they can live as well. So ways that we can change this is, oh, yeah, somebody else put in the chat, this means that polar bears will lose their habitat. Exactly right, 100% right. So what we can do about this is just, this one, I guess, very general, maybe a bit like the drying of land that somebody wanted me to explain a bit further, is that if we all work on reducing our carbon footprint, we all work on pushing the governments and the leaders of our world to change systems and to set goals that will reduce emissions and will stop the heating of our planet, things like meat farming, other things that we're going to come to in this session as well, then we can hopefully, as I say, we can't get that ice back necessarily that we've lost, but we can hopefully put a stop to it. So somebody else, Bryn, has put, we are doing a travel to school survey, which encourages us to walk and cycle. Every time we do this, we prevent greenhouse gases from car journeys entering the atmosphere. Bryn, exactly that. I would shake your hand if I could, exactly that. So we can do all of those things. We can travel to school by walking or cycle. We can go to the shops by walking and cycling. We can maybe not go to Australia by walking and cycling, but we can do other things to lower our carbon footprint. Exactly that. I'm going to come to the next picture. So the same questions again. What's going on? Is it helpful? Who's it helpful to? Is there an alternative or a solution? And what can we do as individuals? And what can we get? What can we hope that leaders will do? So here's a picture. I'm not sure where everybody's from, but for me, I live in London, and this picture is very prevalent in my mind. This picture isn't of anywhere in the UK, but we've all seen these kind of things before. So what's going on here? I'm seeing this as a lit up city at night. So it's not during the daytime, but it's nighttime. So humans do need light, because otherwise we'd be bumping into things, might not be safe, might fall over things. But do we need this much light? So have a look. We can mostly see that a lot of these lights are maybe houses or small businesses, and there are some patches of darkness, but there's a lot of light pollution going on. I learned an interesting fact last night about light pollution, that sometimes animals can be affected by light pollution. So for example, turtles, this was the example that I learned, naturally follow the moon to go and find the sea and where they need for their shelter and their food and to help them live. But actually now, if they're living on a beach near to civilization of humans, they might follow a car light, they might follow the lights of a hotel or of a house, and inevitably end up walking across a road, or inevitably end up further away from their food source and their house, where they live, and that sort of thing. Somebody, Kyle, says, looks like they're using a lot of electricity. We hope it's from renewable sources. It's so hard to know in this picture, isn't it? But I hope it is as well. But let's have a think. When you leave school, or when you leave your house, or when you leave the shops, when everybody's left, do they turn off all the lights? When we walk past Tesco late at night and they're closed, nobody's going in there and buying anything, are the lights off or are the lights on? When you leave school, nobody's there, nobody's learning, everybody's gone home. Do they leave the lights on? These are just small things. Somebody says everybody's left their lights on, but a lot of the time they probably don't need to. Exactly that. So when we leave school and nobody's there, everybody's gone home for the night and nobody's going to be there until tomorrow morning, we can encourage our school to turn off all of the lights because nobody needs them to be on. We can encourage shops, and we can encourage big organizations, big corporations, offices, that when there's nobody in there, they don't need their lights on, or they don't need the heating on, or the air conditioning, or any of those things that they've left on. They can just turn them off until somebody needs to use them. So I'm thinking, if looking at this picture, if everybody who, as Kyle said, turned off all of the things they don't need, then they probably would be a lot darker of a city and a lot less energy being used. So we've got our next picture now, which is what's going on. Same questions. We've got, is there an alternative to this? Now this one is maybe a bit of a trick question, maybe relates to what we were just looking at. So hopefully Kyle is happy that I've put in some renewable sources. Now, these renewable sources, hopefully everybody knows, but a renewable source is something that isn't going to run out. So we've got our fossil fuels, which are very likely to run out, and which are coming from the earth. And these renewable sources are coming, we've got a picture of solar panels, so that's coming from energy coming from the sun. We've got wind turbines, so energy coming from the wind. And we've got hydropower, which is energy that comes from water. So we can see those big waterfalls, and they're pushing almost like the wind turbines, but to make more energy. So somebody's mentioned on our last picture, with so much artificial light, so not real light, people are missing out on being able to see the natural world, like the stars, and animals will be scared away. Exactly that, Martha. That is completely right. Animals will be scared away. Also, we won't be able to see as many beautiful stars and the moon. When you live in a big city, you often can't see as many stars as when you go out into the less busy areas, definitely. So in this new picture, we've asked, what's the alternative to this? So the alternative to these pictures that I've got on the screen right now are back here. Here's the alternative. And we're going to come to some more of them as well. These renewable energies, we're not burning anything. We're not releasing any chemicals by making energy this way. So if I go to my next picture, this is the alternative, which is burning chemicals, maybe in a clothes factory, maybe in a food factory, maybe in a meat factory. And these chemicals, these fossil fuels, are really polluting, as we can even see the pollution in this picture. So we can see the pollution coming out, and in these pictures, we can just see natural ways of making energy, which will help us to light our cities and to show us the way forward. So what we can do in our big world, with our governments and our leaders, what we can do with our leaders is we can get governments to have stricter rules on which chemicals can be burned, which chemicals shouldn't be burned, which are too dangerous to our atmosphere and too much that if we're walking along near to the factory that we might inhale bad chemicals, or just bad chemicals that are being let out into our atmosphere, which eventually are causing temperatures to rise, lands to crack, polar bears to lose their habitat, and so on. So I can see somebody's put in the chat that we're mostly looking at individuals, but as I said, we can demand systemic change, as I say, by writing to our governments, writing to our local MPs, writing to our leaders, going on protests, which we're going to come to in a minute, making stands, as somebody else said, not buying those, maybe encouraging also our schools and our youth clubs and other organisations that we might be part of to also not buy single-use plastics. We can also write to governments, as I say, for them to put more of a strict rule on what big companies can do and how they can use more renewable energy, or how they can stop burning as much fossil fuels and non-renewable energy as possible. I'm very aware that we're running out of time, so I'm just going to check, there we go. I'm just going to check how many we've got left. So this picture, I think, is a picture that everybody has seen before. We've got lots of traffic and a plane as well. So as we're running out of time, I'm just going to flip between this one and our next picture. And again, people might see this as an individual thing of saying that less people could be having their petrol guzzling car, which is letting out a bit like the tower we just saw, that's letting out visible pollution to our planes. Doing that. So Ellie's saying it looks like it will damage the ozone layer. Exactly that. So anything that's letting out pollution or letting out certain chemicals is going to damage our ozone layer, and it's going to damage our environment as a whole. But again, how can we, somebody says some more positive images, we can still produce electricity using the wind, the sun, the waves, the flow of rivers. Exactly that. We can definitely be using natural things to produce electricity and energy. So just very quickly before we come to a close, is that another way that we can demand to our governments and our leaders that we have systemic change and not just individual change, although change does start with us, but we can also demand systemic change, is to write to our governments. Why is flying to France so cheap? Why is it cheaper to fly there than it is to get the train there, when the train is a lot more eco-friendly? It's very cheap sometimes to fly further away when you could get a train that is very expensive. Sometimes it's quicker. Sometimes it's easier to drive somewhere when, again, getting a train or even cycling might be a bit quicker. So again, governments need to make cycling a bit safer. For some people who live in big towns and cities will know cycling isn't always that safe when there's lots of cars around. So we need to demand to our governments that cycling is safer, having more lanes, having car-free areas, and also more charging points for electric cars, and more production of electric cars, not making them so expensive, make them cheaper than the petrol cars, because realistically, they are what is going to help our Earth have less carbon emissions. Not going to cure it straight away. It's going to help have less carbon emissions. Make bike repair more accessible to everybody, and making petrol and petrol cars more expensive and more inaccessible. So that's what. So that's on the sort of treble. And very quickly, we can have our voices heard. So here's some pictures of our young members from Woodcraft Folk protesting and standing up with Fridays for Futures and also other climate emergency protests as well. So we can go out and have our voices heard. We can tell the governments all of the things that we've just thought about. We can tell them all of the images that we're not so happy with in this world and what we want to see changed. And young people, as I said at the beginning, very much we want to have your voices listened to and heard as well. So at Woodcraft Folk, we're very about that. And all of these climate protests need your help, because young people are the future, and therefore it's your futures that you would like to make brighter, greener, and more fair. So just to finish, a vision statement of the world we want is a world where young people are educated and listened to make the future of our planet brighter, greener, and more fair, as I just said. So I would really love for you to go away and think about some of the images that you've seen. Are there any actions that you could take to make some changes that we've mentioned, or are the problems bigger than just you? And we could contact our local MPs and government to encourage change. Go on a march and encourage change. Write to your MP and encourage change. Talk to your head teacher. Talk to other people in your world. And we would really like for world leaders to listen to young people and to invest in infrastructure and green energy to enable a quicker transition to electric vehicles and alternative energy production. So thank you everybody for joining us for the session. If anybody wants to see more Woodcraft Folk activities around the climate emergency, they can head over to dreambiggerhome.uk. And also, if you want to check out Woodcraft Folk's social medias and website for more that's coming up. We're taking a climate emergency month of November, so we've got a new resources page coming out and all sorts of activities for young people to take part in. So thank you to everybody, and thanks so much for everybody who participated in the chat as well.